also be able to understand how these philosophical traditions have influenced the Indian sciences. So generally, there is a misconception about philosophy that it is something to do with adhyatma. Yes, it is, and it has nothing to do with our day-to-day life. So it does not have any influence over our sciences or our empirical world, etc. But that is not the case. In the Indian scenario, the philosophical traditions have had some significant influence on the sciences, and I will try to touch upon how some of the features of Indian philosophy have influenced the sciences. Okay, so before we begin, I just wanted to contextualize the philosophical traditions within the Indian knowledge traditions, because as per the invitation that I got, this is supposed to be a refresher course in Indian knowledge traditions. So I thought I will first begin with Indian knowledge traditions and then identify where the philosophical traditions come as part of the Indian knowledge traditions, and then proceed ahead. So this is our great MyBop, let us say UGC. A definition of Indian knowledge tradition has been given by UGC. It says that the Indian knowledge tradition encompasses all the systematized disciplines of knowledge. So it is not a hodgepodge, just a pishta of different knowledge. It is a systematized discipline which were developed to a high degree of sophistication. So it is not a crude type of knowledge. It is a very sophisticated knowledge which is very well refined in India from ancient time, and all of the traditions and practices. So both theory as well as practice, both of them are there from different communities of India, including the tribal communities that have evolved, refined, and preserved over generations. So the Indian knowledge traditions have not remained static; they have continuously evolved, and the results have been. Nobody has claimed that this is final. The results have been refined over time, and not only have they been refined and evolved, they have also been preserved and passed on to the next generation. So all of these sciences which come as part of this tradition, we give the common label Indian knowledge tradition. So it is not a single subject as it is. It is just a collection of several subjects. And what are those several subjects? One very rough and ready classification of the Indian knowledge tradition is what we call the Chaturdasha Vidyasthana, the 14 fundamental sciences, the Purana, Nyaya, Mimamsa, Dharma Shastra, the 6 Vedanga, and the 4 Veda. So 6 plus 4 is 10. And to these 10, if we add Purana, Nyaya, Mimamsa, and Dharma Shastra, you get 14. To this, some people have also added the Ayurveda, which is the health sciences, Gandharva Veda, which is the science of music and theatre, Artha Shastra, which is political economy or governance, and Dhanur Veda, which is the science of warcraft. So putting these 14 and 4 together, you get the Ashtadasha Vidyasthana. In this classification, you will notice two items I have highlighted, which is Nyaya and Mimamsa. So these are the philosophical traditions, and this is where you can see how within the 14 fundamental sciences, you can find two philosophical traditions. So you can imagine these 14 sciences to be like these 14 bricks which are laying the foundation of Indian knowledge traditions. And you can see that two of those bricks are coming from the philosophical traditions. So what are those two schools? Those are called the Nyaya and Mimamsa. Luckily, you might have familiar with these two terms because of the morning session. The speaker might have touched upon what is Nyaya, what is Mimamsa. So the Nyaya is the school of logic and epistemology. It's supplied logical tools as well as methodological tools to the rest of the Indian knowledge traditions. And Mimamsa is the science of interpretation, how we can interpret a text correctly. It is of great use in sciences like law and other areas. Particularly, this was in Veda, but it can be applicable to the other sciences as well. So why these sciences? So from where this Nyaya and Mimamsa have come? What is the source for all of this? Let us try and understand in the next 1 hour or so. Right. So the philosophical traditions. It is important to understand if you want to understand what Indian knowledge traditions are. It is a little bit important to understand what the philosophical implications are, because all knowledge traditions are founded on some or the other philosophical assumptions. These philosophical assumptions can come in the form of metaphysical assumptions, they can come in the form of epistemological assumptions, or they can come in the form of ethical assumptions. So, for example, a lot of the entirety of classical mechanics depends upon the metaphysical assumption that space is an absolute entity. Modern relativistic mechanics depends upon the philosophical assumption that space is a relative entity. So at the basis or the foundation of all the sciences, there will be some or the other philosophical assumptions, because philosophy happens to be the most abstract and the most general kind of a discipline. So in every science, you will go on assuming some things, and towards, if you go on finding what is the more abstract concept involved over here, what is the more general concept involved over here, invariably you will end up with a philosophical question. So a mathematician never asks the question, what is number, etc. They don't ask. They just assume that there are entities called numbers and we can play with them and we can have a science out of them. But it is a philosopher who comes and asks whether there is anything called as a number, are they real, etc. Similarly, a scientist never asks the question whether there is anything called causation. Every scientist assumes that there is something called causality and enters his or her lab, whereas the philosopher asks the question whether this causation actually exists or is it just some convenience that we have created. In this way, philosophy happens to be at the foundation of all of the sciences. And that is why, if you want to understand what a particular knowledge tradition is, it is better to understand what its philosophical implications are. So I will give you one example, concrete example from my institute over here. We have a chemistry lab over here. So, and this is the photo or the poster of the chemistry lab. And at the bottom of the poster, you can see one sentence that has been written. We think there is color. We think there is sweet. We think there is bitter. But in reality, they are atoms and void. I hope you are all able to see this poster. So this is the assumption that has been made by the chemistry lab. You see, they have reduced the entire world or the entire universe to atoms and void. So if you, this is a philosophical assumption because it is the most general and most abstract assumption that they have made for their science to be possible. So if you ask this chemist what is water, they will say atoms and void. If you ask them what is a glass, they will say it's atoms and void. If you ask them what is this cup, they will say it is atoms and void. If you ask them what is love, they will say it is atoms and void. If you ask them what is pain, they will say it is atoms and void. If you ask them what is hunger, they will say it is atoms and void. So like this, they will explain everything in reality based upon atoms and void. So this is just one example I'm saying. This is, whether you agree with it or not, that's a different thing. Okay, you are free to disagree with it. But this is the assumption that they are making. And my only point is that this is a philosophical assumption because it happens to be the most general and most abstract assumption that they're making for their science to be possible. In the same way, the Indian philosophical traditions also make some or the other philosophical assumptions, as I gave you a small evidence for it. In the 14 Vidyasthanas, in the 14 foundational sciences, you have Nyaya, Mimamsa, as well as Dharma Shastra. Why I have highlighted Dharma Shastra is because the ethical assumptions of the Indian knowledge traditions, if you want to know what are the ethical assumptions of the Indian knowledge traditions, you should go through the Dharma Shastra, right? And if you want to know what are the logical assumptions of the Indian knowledge traditions, you can go through the Nyaya. If you want to find out what are the textual interpretation assumptions of the Indian knowledge traditions, you can go through the Mimamsa Darshana, like this. So just like all knowledge traditions are built upon some or the other philosophical ideas, the Indian knowledge traditions are also built upon some or the other philosophical ideas. So we will try to find out what these philosophical ideas are. Okay. So now that you have had already one session in Indian philosophy, can somebody tell me what is the most popular word for Indian philosophy in India?
Darshana.
Very fantastic. Darshan. Thank you, the previous speaker here. So, darshana is a word which comes from the drish, the dhatu drish, and some affixes and suffixes are added, based upon which you get the meaning that it is the instrument to see correctly. Okay, or it is the true vision or the instrument of true vision. Both meanings are there, right? But immediately one question should come. Also, there is another reason why we say that darshana is the most common word for Indian philosophy, because we have works available called Sarva Darshana Sangraha, Sad Darshana Shamuchaya. Like that, we have historical works available with the title Darshana in their book name. And if you open the book, you will see the philosophical questions which people like Plato, Aristotle, Kant, etc. asked. So this is another textual evidence for us to say that darshana is one of the names for philosophy in India. And as I told you, it is the meaning of the word darshana is true vision or the instrument of true vision. Okay. So immediately one question you can ask, what is it that we want to have a true vision of? Any guesses? What does philosophy want to have the vision of?
True vision about elements.
True vision about just the elements. That's all. Then what is the difference between philosophy and chemistry?
Not only elements.
Yeah, not only elements. You see, philosophy is the most general and most abstract subject. It is the most metadisciplinary subject out there. So we are not interested just in knowing the truth about elements, just in knowing about the truth about our soul, just in knowing the truth about the God or something like that. We are interested in knowing the true nature of everything. And the Sanskrit word for this thing called true nature is tattva. That is why another word for philosophy in the Indian tradition is Tattva Shastra. So you may ask why this fellow is giving so many words. Can't he just simply translate philosophy as darshana and go ahead? See, generally what happens is that the more complex a word is, the more difficult it is to find a one-to-one translation. If I say blue, you can simply say in Hindi it is called Neela and go ahead. Okay. For simple concepts, it is easy to find one-to-one translation. But the more complicated the concept is, the more difficult it becomes to find a single word to replace it. So I cannot use a single word to replace something called equality or democracy or something like that. Similarly, if you want me to translate physics, it is not possible for me to just give you one word in our languages. Like that only for philosophy also, we have to consider different words which will be functionally equivalent to the word philosophy in the Greek tradition or in the English language. So one word for philosophy very popular is darshana, which means the instrument of seeing correctly. What do we want to see correctly? We want to see the true nature of everything. The true nature is the Sanskrit word for true nature or essence is tattva. इसका तत्व क्या है? ईश्वर का तत्व को जानो, आत्मा के तत्व को जानो, ये जगत के तत्व को जानो. Like that, when somebody is telling, what they are saying is that recognize the true nature of the Atman, recognize the true nature of the world, recognize ये पंचभूत के तत्व को जानो. Like that, when they are saying that recognize the true nature of these panchabhuta. And since philosophy is interested in finding out the true nature of everything, the essence of everything, another name for philosophy is Tattva Shastra. Now, one question that you can ask is that how do we go about doing this? See, if you tell me find out the weight of a laptop, I can go and do some experiment and tell you what is the mass of a laptop. If you tell me what is the speed of light, I can perform some experiment and tell you what is the speed of light or something like that. But if I want to find out the true nature, the tattva of everything, what is the method that I can use? I'm sure all of you have been tortured by one session on methodology. In your thesis also, you might have written methodology, etc. So what do you think is the method of philosophy? Considering the subject matter of philosophy is tattva of everything. What do you think is the methodology that we can use for such a subject matter?
Analytic method.
Analytic method. Okay. Can you say a little bit more what you mean by the analytic method? When we do analysis of something, what do we provide? How do we do the analysis?
We provide the parameters.
Okay. What sort of parameters will you provide?
No, I don't think parameters. See, suppose one theory. Suppose a theory of Charvaka philosophy, that is Dehatmabad or self theory. We do some analysis, either self is there or not. If self is there, what is the reflection of self? That is
correct. This analysis, can it be an empirical analysis like how we do in chemistry, physics, etc.? Can I give you an empirical analysis of the Anatmavada? No, it is not possible. I cannot do an I can only give you so the tool of the philosopher is not in experiments, data collection, questionnaires, etc. This is not the method of the philosopher.
That 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 in philosophy.
Sorry?
We can't show any empirical analysis in philosophy.
Correct. We cannot show any empirical analysis or something. We cannot show. That is why what do? We provide arguments.
Yes.
So the only tool available to the philosopher or the darshanika is argument. But if I give you an argument, will you accept it? No, you will not accept it. You will give me a counter argument. On that I will give another counter argument. On that I will give another counter argument. So this process of vada, samvada, argument, counter argument, etc. This critical inquiry that we do, or the critical analysis that we do, there is a name for this process, which in Arthashastra of Kautilya is called Anvikshiki. So from the second word Tattva Shastra, you get what is the subject matter of Darshana. The subject matter of Darshana is Tattva. And what is from the third word Anvikshiki, you get the methodology of Darshana, which is Anvikshiki, critical inquiry. I should tell everybody that critical inquiry does not mean criticism. Okay, so वो criticize कर रहे हैं मेरे को, like that we say in no, that is not a critical inquiry. A critical here means what are the limits of this argument? Where does this argument work? Where does this argument not work? What are the limitations of this argument? That is what the word critical inquiry here means. And this word we have taken from Arthashastra of Kautilya. The extended quotation I will present in the next slide. But for now, you please take it that Anvikshiki is another word for philosophy, and it is important because it highlights the methodology of philosophy or Darshana, which is critical inquiry. Last and the most irritating question that we should ask, and your students also will ask you when you present this in the class, is why should we do all of this? सर हम तो यहाँ बीकॉम पढ़ने के लिए आए, बीए पढ़ने के लिए, क्या फिलॉसफी झगड़ के हमको कहीं को, like that they may ask you. So then why is it that we do this Darshanika inquiry? Why do we want to find out the tattva of everything? Why do we want to bang our heads with argument? So what do you think is the answer? What is the purpose of doing philosophy in the Indian tradition? Any guess?
To get the proper knowledge. To get the proper knowledge of the world.
Yes, to get the proper knowledge of the world. What I will do with that knowledge? Why should we get the proper knowledge of the world?
So that we can create perfection.
We will reach to the wisdom.
What do you do with that wisdom?
Which is beyond of knowledge.
Why we should get that wisdom? What will we do with that wisdom?
To guide the world in a proper way.
Why should we guide the world in a proper way? What do we all want in life?
Yes.
What do we want? What do we want in our life? What is the one thing that all of us desire in life?
Pleasure, happiness.
Happiness.
That's all. That's all. All of us desire happiness in life. That is the one thing that is common to every one of us. Either we desire knowledge, or at least negatively speaking, we don't want suffering. In Hindi we say no, yaar tu mera ko help mat kar, mere beech mein mat aa, like that we say no. In the same way, it's okay if we don't get pleasure, we at least don't want any suffering. So that knowledge, we want knowledge, yes. We want wisdom, yes. We want the entire world to be happy. We want to guide the world in the proper way, yes. Why? For what reason? Because we want to be happy. But there is a small problem over here. Just think about what are the things that you do in your life for happiness. So for example, biryani makes me very happy, let us say. So I go and buy some biryani. What is the famous item? Nagpur, that som papdiya. What is that orange color papdi?
Stone roll.
Yeah. I had come to Nagpur sometime back last year. I bought that som papdi and I went. So I buy that for my happiness. First of all, to buy it, I have to spend around 120 rupees or something like that. So that is a cost of that happiness. And then that sweet is over in 5 minutes. So I am happy only for those 5 minutes. That's all. So before getting the sweet, I am not happy. After eating the sweet also, I am unhappy. And while eating the sweet also, I am extra worried. Ayo, mera sugar बढ़ जाएगा. Oh, मेरा पेट ज़्यादा मोटा हो जाएगा. Like that and all, we are worried. So, in other words, what I am saying is that in our day-to-day life, no matter what we do for happiness, there is always a mixture of suffering in it. शादी किया तो भी प्रॉब्लम है, नहीं किया तो भी प्रॉब्लम है, बच्चे पैदा किया तो भी प्रॉब्लम है, नहीं किया तो भी प्रॉब्लम है, प्रमोशन मिला तो भी प्रॉब्लम है, नहीं मिला तो भी प्रॉब्लम है, JRF आया तो भी प्रॉब्लम है, नहीं आया तो भी प्रॉब्लम है. No matter what we do in our life for happiness, there is always a little bit masala of suffering. So the Indian philosopher is asking the question, is it possible for us to be happy without any iota of suffering? I should not have even a single bit of suffering. It should just be 100% happiness without even a trace of suffering. Is that possible? And the answer is yes, it is possible. And such a state is called as moksha. And since the philosopher is interested in this particular state, another word for philosophy in the Indian tradition is moksha shastra. Moksha Shastra. You all might have heard of something called as Purushartha. हमारा जीवन में 4 पुरुषार्थ होते हैं, धर्म, अर्थ, काम, मोक्ष, like that. So this moksha purushartha is the aim of the philosophical traditions of India. Remember, what is the difference between moksha and day-to-day happiness? Day-to-day happiness is temporary. It is always mixed with suffering. Whereas moksha is a place where there is no suffering at all. Whether there is happiness or not, that's a different thing. But there is not even a single trace of any moksha. In our day-to-day life, we can experience moksha in very fleeting moments. For example, if you are listening to a very good, fantastic song, let us say, you get lost in the movie. Arey, kya movie tha yaar? Main to ho gaya yaar. Like that we say, no? There are some tiny seconds we can feel it. But the Indian philosopher is interested in telling how we can have this moksha state throughout our existence. So since this is the purpose of doing philosophy or darshana, the Moksha Shastra is another name for philosophy. So from this slide, you should take away what are the different words in our tradition which are functionally equivalent to philosophy. So Darshana is the most common word. Tattva Shastra means the science of examining the essence of everything, that tells you what is the subject matter of Darshana. Anvikshiki, which is critical inquiry, it tells you what is the method of Darshana. And the last one, which is Moksha Shastra, it tells you what is the prayojana. कुछ भी पढ़ने से पहले हम प्रयोजन पूछते हैं ना, क्यों पढ़ना? All the teachers today are asked to switch over to something called as learning outcomes, isn't it? Outcome based education. Syllabus खत्म करने में मत रहो, outcomes achieve करना है, like that you say, isn't it? So like that, what is the outcome of doing darshana? The final outcome of doing darshana is that we will go to a state called as moksha, right? But that does not mean that just because we are aiming for moksha, there are no day-to-day advantages of doing darshana. There are certain day-to-day advantages also of doing darshana. What are they? For finding this out, let us see the full quotation of Arthashastra, which he tells that Anvikshiki benefits the people by critically inquiring into Veda, into economics, and into government. Please see the last sentence of the quotation. It says, it keeps their mind steadfast in the times of adversity and prosperity and makes them skillful in thinking, speaking, and acting. So, आप अगर दर्शन मोक्ष या दर्शन शास्त्र करेंगे, you will become more skilled in your thinking, speaking, and acting. So, what Madam also told some time ago, she said that in philosophy we do analysis. If we do that critical analysis regularly on a day-to-day basis, if you do that to the kind of analysis that we do in philosophy, you will become very sharp in your intellect. You will become very refined with your words, and your acting or your character also will reflect. Your conduct also will reflect in it. So this is the day-to-day advantage that you can get by doing darshana. And also you will remain steadfast in the times of adversity and prosperity. Jada sukh hoga to we will not become too happy, nor we will become too sad, right? So गीता में इसको बोलते हैं स्थित प्रज्ञा ऐसा करके. So we will not become too much attached. So promotion मिला, हाँ ठीक है मिला, नहीं मिला, अच्छा ठीक है नहीं मिला, like that. So you will not be like, oh चलो promotion नहीं मिला, मेरा HOD बहुत बड़ा, like that. We will not become so much. So that is the day-to-day advantage also. But the Darshanika is not happy with such day-to-day advantages. That fellow is telling, let us go to the extreme level of happiness, where there is no suffering at all, and that particular state is called as moksha. So from these two slides, you should have understood what is the what are the different words for darshana in the Indian tradition, and what are the advantages of doing darshana, both in the day-to-day life as well as in the ultimate end of doing darshana. Now, I told you in the previous slide that the subject matter of philosophy is tattva. We want to find out the true nature of everything. But this is a very, very big problem to solve. I want to find out the true nature of everything. So whenever a problem is too big to solve, what do we do? When some problem is too big to solve, what do we do?
We break the problems into parts.
Very good. We break the problem into smaller parts, which is also called analysis, by the way. We break it down into smaller parts. But remember, we are in the realm of philosophy. So we have to break the problem down into philosophical parts. So how can we do that? What are the parts into which we can divide this inquiry? I will give you one hint. I will ask you a set of philosophical questions. You tell me what is the element which is common to all of them. I want to find out the true nature of God. I want to find out the true nature of the world. I want to find out the true nature of knowledge. I want to find out the true nature of beauty. I want to find out the true nature of justice. Are you able to notice some common thing in all of them?
I.
I, sir.
Hi. Very good. Very good.
It's me.
So for every philosophical inquiry, for any inquiry for that matter, there will always be a subject of inquiry, which is you. You are the subject of inquiry. And if there is a subject of inquiry, the person who is doing the inquiry, there has to be an object of inquiry. Whether it is justice, whether it is beauty, whether it is law, whether it is chemistry, whether it is metals, whatever it is, there has to be an object of inquiry. And connecting this subject to the object, there has to be a means of inquiry. Okay, so there will be a subject, there will be an object, and there will be a means by which this subject is accessing the object. So in the realm of science or natural sciences, you are the scientist, the physicist or the chemist or the metallurgist, whoever it is, they are the subject of inquiry, and they are inquiring into naturally occurring phenomena such as conductivity, heat resistivity, whatever it is that they are inquiring. Blue litmus test, red litmus test, acidity, base, alkalinity, whatever it is, that is the object of inquiry. And they are using a particular means of inquiry, which is like experiments, microscope, telescope, litmus paper, oscilloscope, whatever it is they are using different types of inquiry. So now but the philosopher does not have the luxury to limit himself or herself to a natural world. That fellow is interested in finding out the true nature of everything. But as I told you, this is too general a problem to solve. So they have broken it down into three parts: problems related to the subject, problems related to the object, problems related to the means of inquiry. So some philosophical darshanas, some darshanas focused on the subject of inquiry. Let us find out what is the true nature of the subject, then we can answer all the problems. Some people focused on the object of inquiry. No. Let us first find out what are the objects about which we can legitimately inquire about. Then we can solve all the problems. Then some people focused on the central vertex, which is the means of inquiry. They said that, look, all this problem is happening because we don't have proper methodology. We will first fix the methodology, then all problems will get sorted on themselves. So different traditions focused on different vertices. So for example, in the morning you might have heard of something called as yoga, Vedanta, etc. They focused on the pramata or the subject vertex. Some darshanas like Vaisheshika, Sankhya focused on the object vertex. Some traditions like the Nyaya and the Buddhists, etc., focused on the means or the pramana vertex. I have also given the corresponding Sanskrit tradition over there, Sanskrit meaning over there, word. So different traditions focused on different vertices. Just because I'm saying they focused on different vertices does not mean that they did not have anything to say about the other vertex. Their starting point was one vertex. So that is what they started off with. But though different traditions focused on different vertices, they all had certain common characteristics. And that is what we label as Indian traditions. So though they all had different approaches, some things were very common to them. What were common to them? First of all, they were all practically oriented. Philosophy in India was not simply an intellectual exercise. ऐसा दो बुक लेके बैठ गया पेड़ के नीचे, it is not like that. Okay, बहुत टाइम पास करने के लिए हम क्या हमारे पास बहुत टाइम है तो चलो कुछ भी सोचेंगे. It is not like that. It is a very practical exercise meant to solve a particular problem. What is the problem that it is meant to solve? That is there in the second bullet point, that they all recognized that there is something fundamentally wrong with this world. They all felt a deep sense of spiritual disquiet when they looked at the world. You all know the story of the Buddha. As soon as he stepped out of the palace, he saw full suffering only. And he was deeply moved by why it is the case that our world is like this. And I also told you some 10 minutes back that no matter what you do, whether you get married, don't get married, have children, do PhD, don't do PhD, if you are a science faculty, there is a problem. If you are humanities faculty, there is a problem. You are law faculty, doesn't matter where you are, no matter what you do, there is always some or the other problem in your life. So what we say dukkha, right? So there is always some dukkha in your life. Our Indian philosophers were so motivated by this dukkha that they even gave a classification of dukkha. So dukkha comes in three varieties. One is called the Adi Bhautika Dukkha, means the suffering that happens because of natural forces. We get sick when the season changes, we get flu, or because it is corona, all of famine, floods, etc. All of these are examples of Adi Bhautika Dukkha. Then there is another kind of dukkha called Adi Daivika Dukkha, the dukkha that happens because of some divine forces. You might have heard, no? इसके कुंडली में मंगल उच्च में बैठा है, वो उसके लिए इसको ब्राउन कलर का अंगूठी पहना है, like something like that they will tell, no? no? So these are all examples of Adi Deivika Dukkha, the suffering that happens because of divine or supernatural forces. And the last one is Adhyatmika Dukkha. That is the suffering that happens because of your own self. There is something missing in you. You have seen the movie Kantara. There is one Kannada movie was there, no? It was dubbed in so many languages, Kantara.
Yes, sir.
In that,
Yes, sir.
you remember the opening scene in that king has everything. He has a nice family. He has a good kingdom. Everything that fellow has. Yet there is something missing in me. That fellow is not happy. So that kind of a suffering is called Adhyatmika suffering. So our Indian philosophy arose out of this dukkha, this problem of dukkha. How can we remove this dukkha once and for all? Not a temporary solution, mind you. Once and for all, how can we remove this dukkha? That is what they were interested in knowing. Till now, I am talking like this. You may be thinking that Indian philosophy is so pessimistic. Why these people are talking about dukkha all the time like that? You may be thinking. But they are not pessimists. Only the motivation is coming from dukkha. They were very, very optimistic because they had a faith in an eternal order. That is what the third bullet point says, that they had a faith in some eternal order, that this eternal order will take us from the state of suffering to the state of no suffering. The world is arranged in such a way that if we follow the proper path, we will eventually go from the state of suffering to the state of no suffering. And this moral order was called by various names, Rita, Apurva, Adrishta, Karma, Dhamma, like that. It was called in different times. It was called in different ways. But they had a faith that this world is arranged according to some plan. And this is one of the very important things to understand about the Indian civilization. You can use this button to tell me, the participants can use that raise hand button is there, no? You can use that raise hand button to tell me how many of you believe in something like destiny, fate, तकदीर, ऐसा हमारा फेट है. अगर होना है तो होते ही व्हाट इज दिस इन हिंदी, अगर लिखा है तो जरूर होगा भाई. Like that, how many of you believe in fate, etc.? Okay, only 2-3 people have raised it. Acha, okay. So our Indian traditions, all of them believed that this world is made according to some plan. There is some plan according to which the world is made. How come only you people are attending this refresher course? How come you are wearing this color shirt only today? How is it that of all the people, the resource person for this refresher course, Venkatraghavan has been selected? How it is possible? The answer will be that finally it is because of some plan. There is some grand plan. There is a design according to which this cosmos has been made. And that design will take us from the place of suffering to the place of no suffering. So that is the third point. The fourth point is that all of them commonly agree that the ultimate reason why we all suffer is because of avidya or ignorance. That is the root cause of all our problems. You only think in your day-to-day life, you suffer because you don't know, you don't have a particular information, isn't it? You are cheated by your relatives, let us say. At that time, what do you say? Arey, yehi hai unka, this is the true nature. You see, you didn't know this. Like that you say, isn't it? You supposing your friend cheats you. What do you say? Arey, yehi hai uska asli swarup dikha diya dekh. Like that we say, isn't it? So we don't know their real nature. So some kind of ignorance is there because of which we are not able to be happy. And if ignorance is the lock, what is the key? Knowledge. But you will see one star mark that I have put over there for that knowledge, because it is not theoretical knowledge. It is a practical knowledge. It is a knowledge that you have to experience. You cannot simply read some 4-5 books in Darshana and say that ज्ञान मिल गया मेरे को, मैं liberate हो गया. Like that you cannot say. Like it is a knowledge that you have to implement in practice. So that is the unique feature of this philosophical or darshanik jnana. And in order to be able to receive this jnana, you should have certain mental discipline. You should have some spiritual discipline. How do you cultivate that discipline? By doing yoga. So that is what I have written over there, that the practice of yoga was required to cultivate this discipline. You will always see people like the Buddha or the Tirthankaras, they are always in some yogic position. Why that is required? Because that inculcates a sense of mental discipline in you. You will be capable receptacles of this Atma Vidya. And this philosophical activity is not a never-ending activity. It ends at some place. What is the place that it ends? It ends at liberation. Once you attain moksha, you are no longer a darshanika. That's all. You are liberated. That's all. So you can imagine darshana in the Indian context to be something like a, okay, and this ladder is something that you use to go to the place of no suffering. In our day-to-day life, when we put a ladder somewhere, we don't throw away that ladder, isn't it? We retain that ladder. Why do we retain that ladder? because we want to come down. But darshana is such a ladder that takes you from the place of suffering to the place of no suffering. Once you go to that place, why do you want to come back to suffering? Isn't it? So that ladder is no longer required once you attain moksha. So that is what I have written over there, that liberation is the highest end. So darshana in the Indian context is not a never-ending exercise. It ends in moksha. As far as the execution of this is concerned, there was a very reliable teacher-student relationship along with the practice of vada, samvada, vivada, etc. And also they had some very good bit of textual sources based upon which they developed this philosophical activity. And all of this developed from the Veda, what we say, the religious questions are not separated from the philosophical questions. In today's academia, philosophy is very different from religion. But in our tradition, if you see, they can freely talk about God and karma and all these things, which will seem like religion. But that is not the case in the modern academia. So there is a good interplay between the philosophical questions and the religious questions. We did not see a distinction between these two questions. So these are some of the common features that are there between the different traditions. Whatever you learned in the morning, the Charvaka, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, etc., you learned all of these. So these are some of the common features based upon which it is legitimate to give the label Indian. Though there are so many traditions, how come you are giving that label Indian? If somebody asks, you can say that, look, all these common traits are there. That is why we call them Indian philosophy. So I hope this is fairly clear now. Here, how did these philosophical traditions develop over time? I have just given a brief periodization. Everything in Indian knowledge tradition starts with the Veda. Until we have discovered something more about the Indus civilization, we will have to start with the Veda only. So the philosophy in the Veda is very, very speculative, and it is dependent upon something called as a pravritti marga. We say pravritti, that is the path of action. That is, you do your yajna or you do your action, you attain punya. With that punya, you go to the world of your ancestors, and once the punya is exhausted, you come back into the real world, right? So this is what the cycle was. But during the time of the Upanishads, they got sick of this cycle and they said that, what is this? We are just stuck in one loop, going, dying, coming down, going to Pitraloka, coming down, going to Pitraloka, coming down. This is not the kind of life that I want to exist. I want to break free from. So there started a new type of thinking called as Nivritti Marga, or the path of renunciation. How can we step away from the action? And this clash between Pravritti Marga and Nivritti Marga, that is path of action and path of renunciation, it peaked during the third phase, which I have called the transitionary phase. So in this phase, the clash between the path of action and the path of renunciation reached its ultimate peak, and it resulted in several traditions which we call the Shramana traditions. Two of the Shramana traditions that are alive even today are the Jaina and the Bauddha tradition. And also, one very important thing that happened on the Vaidika Darshana side is that the Ramayana and the Mahabharata were developed during this time. And if you notice the Mahabharata particularly, it is filled with stories about doing your duty, right? What happens if you take up the Nivritti Marga, if you renounce, what bad things will happen? The Mahabharata is a standing example of that. And the most greatest example of a person who abandoned his duty at the right time was Arjuna. So when he had to fight, he just abandoned his weapons, isn't it? So the Mahabharata shows what catastrophe will happen if you don't do your dharma. If you follow the path of Nivritti, if all of us follow the path of Nivritti, what will happen? The Ramayana is a very stark example for that, right? And so the Mahabharata is a stark example for that. So after the end of this period, the transitionary period, it started the systematization of different darshanas started, which is what we will be focusing on. In the morning also, you might have encountered these Astika darshanas, Nastika darshanas, etc. That started in the third phase. So after the composition of the Mahabharata, after the rise of the Shramana traditions, the Shramana traditions were continuously asking questions to the Vaidika Sampradaya to know how you are telling this, explain this, how you are telling, explain that, etc. So in order to answer to those questions, these different darshanas started. And we will be focusing for the rest of the session on those systematic schools which we call as darshanas. So these darshanas developed out of the various strands of philosophy that was there in the Upanishad, and it was the problem was same, but different traditions took different approaches. many schools were there earlier in the Sarva Darshana Sangraha. Nearly 16 schools have been mentioned, but 9 of them are very, very popular, which is the Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, Vedanta, Charvaka, Bauddha, and Jaina. So these are the traditions which are very common. And in the morning, you might have had an introduction to them. So I will not want to spend too much time on this. So if there is any point which the madam may not have told, maybe I can touch upon that. So I hope it is clear to you from the morning session that this word Astika and Nastika has nothing to do with God. It is a better word that you can use is maybe Vaidika and non-Vaidika. So the Vaidika darshanas are 6: Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, and Uttara Mimamsa. The non-Vedika darshanas are the Charvaka, Bauddha, and Jaina. So because why I am telling Vaidika and non-Vedika is because I was having this discussion with a Jaina scholar in Madras University, and she told me that, see, according to us, you people are Nastika. Like that she told me. So this, whether you are called a Astika or a Nastika, depends upon what is the foundational belief that you believe in. So if you believe in the tenets of Jaina Darshana, you are Astika for them, you are Nastika for everybody else. If you believe in the Tripitaka, you are Astika for the Buddhists and Nastika for everybody else. If you believe in the Veda, you are Nastika for the Vedantins, so for the Vaidikas, and you are Nastika for everybody else. So like that, it depends upon which corpus you believe in. What is your foundational work that you believe in? That based upon that, you will be an Astika or an Nastika. That's why I am telling a better translation or a better category that we can use is Vaidika Darshana and a non-Vaidika Darshana. And if you take any English book and read the translation, you will find the translation of Astika as Orthodox and Nastika as heterodox. So as soon as you hear this word Orthodox, what is the picture that comes to your mind? Hey, wo log bahut Orthodox log hai bhai. Like that, when somebody says, what do you imagine?
में थॉट की क्लैरिटी नहीं होती है और पूर्वाग्रह से जो ग्रसित होते हैं उन्हें हम कह सकते हैं।
हाँ, उन्हें जो पहले से वो खुद पे नहीं सोचते हैं, जो पहले से आया है उसी को दोहराते रहते हैं. ओके, in what other context have you heard this word orthodox? वो लोग बहुत orthodox लोग हैं भाई. लगते हैं
पुराने सोच वाले.
क्या वाले?
पुराने सोच वाले लोग.
हाँ, वो yes, पुराने सोच वाले. Yeah, you need to raise your hand. You can just unmute and tell. Yeah.
सर टीवी पे एक ऐड आता है पेंट का.
Very rigid.
Sir, रूढ़िवादी.
Yes. परंपरावादी. परंपरा. Yes, of course. परंपरावादी. वो रिचुअल्स, जब देखो स्नान, पूजा पाठ, अरे स्नान करने से पहले ये नहीं करना चाहिए, आज शनिवार है, आज ये नहीं खाना चाहिए, अब वो नहीं खाना चाहिए, etc. These are the kinds of things that come to our mind. Yeah, they are rigid to their rituals. Yeah, very good. So they are very ritualistic, etc. These are the ideas that come to our mind when somebody uses the word orthodox, isn't it? But you should avoid all of these connotations. The word orthodox, you should not understand any of these things. The word orthodox you should take in the literal sense. Orthodoxa. Doxa is a Greek word which means a set of beliefs. And ortho, you might have heard orthopedician. So which means aligning. So if you are aligned with a series of doxa, then you are called as orthodox. If you are not aligned with the series of beliefs, you are called as heterodox. That's all. So it is not that the heterodox people or the Nastikas don't have rituals. You might have seen, I am told that in Nagpur there are many Jain people. You can imagine how ritualistic they are. They are very strict in their rituals, isn't it? Right? Some of them don't eat after sunset and things like that. So it is not that rituals are not there for the heterodox people or Nastika people. They also have rituals. The only difference is that the set of beliefs that these people believe in, they don't believe in. That's all. That is the only thing that you should take. So it is not like Orthodox people are very, very conservative, whereas Heterodox people are very, very liberal. No, nothing. No, none of those English connotations you should take over here. We should simply take the literal meaning of the term orthodoxa and heterodox. The rest of the things I am not stretching on too much because maybe the morning speaker has already spent some time on them. But I will present why these different darshanas are paired together. Why Nyaya Vaisheshika is paired together? Because both of them together form a single system. Nyaya provides the epistemology and Vaisheshika provides the metaphysics. For those of you who are not familiar with these terminologies, epistemology means the study of knowledge. I had shown you one triangle, isn't it? Pramana, Prameya, and the Pramata. I had shown you one triangle. If you want, I can go back again. So this triangle I had shown you. So this Pramana, whatever concerns itself with Pramana, that is called as epistemology. Whatever concerns itself with the Prameya, that is called the metaphysics. To some extent, it overlaps with the Pramata also. So generally, a system is supposed to give all three of them, but generally it is not possible. I told you that the Indian Darshanas divided their work, isn't it? So in this case, the Nyaya and Vaisheshika divided their work by saying, yeah, is there any question? I can take it to the end, perhaps. Yeah. So the Nyaya and the Vaisheshika divided their work. The Nyaya provided the epistemology and the Vaisheshika provided the metaphysics. The Sankhya provided the theory and the Yoga provided the practice. So the Sankhya gave the theory as to why we suffer, etc. And the Yoga told what are the practical steps that we can take in order to overcome this suffering. Similarly, the Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa, they both form a single system because both of them are devoted to the proper interpretation of the Veda. So see, this Veda is a very, very complex piece of work. Okay, you cannot simply pick it up like a newspaper and start reading it. Okay, it requires a lot of interpretational ability. Even if you know English or Hindi, you cannot take the Constitution and read it, isn't it? It requires a lot of interpretational skills. So in the same way, the Veda also requires, understanding the Veda also requires a lot of interpretational ability, and those interpretational techniques are given by the Mimamsa traditions. And the Purva Mimamsa is called Purva because it focuses on the Brahmana section, which is the earlier part of the Veda. By the way, this Brahmana has nothing to do with the caste Brahmana. So this is one section of the Veda, that is why it is called, which contains all the rituals and things like that. That is the Brahmana section. So since the Purva Mimamsa concerns itself with the ritual part, it is called Purva Mimamsa. And because the Uttara Mimamsa or Vedanta is concerned with the Upanishadic section, it is called Uttara Mimamsa. So the most popular name for Uttara Mimamsa is Vedanta. So you all might have heard this word, Vedanta. So the more popular name for Uttara Mimamsa is Vedanta. Right. So in table you can see the different people who have systematized this knowledge. In this table you will be able to see, on the left hand side you will be able to see the name of the Darshana, and in the middle you will be able to see the name of a person, Kanada, Gautama, Kapila, Patanjali, etc. In all of them, you should not think that they are the founders of the school. Only one person can be called a founder of a discipline, which is Gautama Buddha. That's all. In all of them, in all of the Indian philosophical traditions, only one tradition can be said to have a founder, which is Buddhism, and the founder of that is Gautama Buddha. All other people should be understood as systematizers. It is not that before Gautama there was no Nyaya. It is not like this. Nyaya was there before him also. But what did Gautama do? That fellow collected all the information that was available and put it in a systematic format. If any mathematics people are there in the audience, you will know that there is a very important work in geometry called as Elements of Euclid. We call it Euclidean geometry, we call it, isn't it? It is not that before Euclid there was no geometry. It is not like that. But what did Euclid do? He systematized all that knowledge and put it in a systematic format, right? Similarly, it is not that before Newton there was no physics. It is not like that. But what did Newton do? He systematized all that knowledge and put it in a very in the form of laws, etc. With which, on the basis of which people could do physics far more easily. So you should think of all the other people only as systematizers of a particular tradition. So Jaimini is a systematizer of Mimamsa. Vyasa is a systematizer for Vedanta. Patanjali is a systematizer for Yoga. That is how you should understand them. And how did they systematize this? You can see a small pyramid on the right hand side of the slide. They systematized it in the form of a sutra. You might have heard this word sutra. So the most important sutras are the sutras of Panini. Each tradition has its own sutra. Whatever, in order to tell the sutra, you will have to explain a lot of things. This explanation is called as the bhashya or the commentary. And in some places, wherever the bhashya has not said something, some fill in the blanks will be done. That will be done by a set of works called the Vartika. So the sutra, bhashya and Vartika form the textual basis for all the philosophical traditions in India. So the sutra is very, very small. You will not be able to understand. It is very much like my PPT. If you want to understand what is a sutra, you can understand it functionally equivalent to my PPT. If I simply give you my PPT without me speaking along with it, you will not be able to understand a lot of things. in the same way, the sutra is. Sutra is just a small bulleted summary of a lot of things. 1 hour of lecture will be squeezed into a single sutra. So that 1 hour of explanation will be packed into the Bhashya or the next set of words or the commentary words. And if the Bhashya also has not said something or some extra additions have to be made, that is made in the Vartika. So all traditions have a sutra, they have a Bhashya, and they have the Vartika. So generally the sutra comes first. After 100, 200 years, a Bhashya comes. After another 100 or 200 years, the Vartika comes. So this is how the textual basis of the philosophical tradition is formed. So now just to take you through a brief summary of the different tenets of the important tenets. The first school is Charvaka. It is a very interesting school. Their central belief is that we can get knowledge only via perception. That's all. जो हम by the way, perception here means sense perception. जो हमारे इंद्रिय से हमको मिलता है, only that is knowledge. That's all. Because we cannot perceive God through senses, God does not exist. Because we cannot perceive karma through our senses, karma does not exist. Because we cannot perceive dharma through our senses, dharma does not exist. Because we cannot perceive akasha through our senses, akasha by the way is not the sky, akasha is an element. पंचभूत में एक है आकाश है, बाकी है पृथ्वी, जल, अग्नि, वायु. They accept these 4 things, but they don't accept akasha because it is not perceivable by the senses. So they don't believe in afterlife, they don't believe in karma, they don't believe in moksha or any such thing. They believe that pleasure is the only aim of life. Let us just live life and enjoy here. If there are any younger participants, they will know a popular word called YOLO. YOLO. Y-O-L-O. YOLO. Like that they say. What is the full form of YOLO? You only live once. YOLO. So the Charvaka are the only people who believe in this YOLO philosophy. So they think that only one life is there, let us just enjoy. So please don't think that these Charvakas are like our modern day scientists. That is not the case. Scientists believe in inferences. So all of the scientists who are there in the audience, you all believe in inference. You all make statistical inference. What do you do in your thesis? You do a sample study, and based upon the sample, you generalize it to the population, isn't it? This kind of a method is not at all acceptable to the Charvaka. For them, only pleasure and sense perception are sources of knowledge. The second tradition is Bauddha. It is dependent upon the 4 noble truths. The first noble truth is that there is suffering. The second noble truth is that there is a cause for suffering. The third noble truth is that there is a cessation of suffering. And the fourth noble truth is that there is a path to that end, or that there is a path to that end of suffering. So this is based upon the teachings of the Buddha. And they believe that we all suffer because of not knowing that the world is ever changing. So in our Indian tradition, there are 2 extreme views. Reality is permanent, change is an illusion. The other extreme is reality is ever changing, permanence is an illusion. I repeat again. One extreme says that reality is permanent, change is an illusion. जो जगत है वो एक ही है, जो बदलाव होता है वो हमारे अविद्या की वजह से होता है. That is what one extreme says. Another extreme says that no. The world is ever changing. Permanence is an ignorance. To think that it is permanent is ignorance, or it is suffering. So the Buddhist takes the second alternative. They say that reality is kshanika. It is instances. Every day, every moment it is changing. But we believe that it is permanent. Oh, this is Raghavan. This is his job. Like that, we only give names like Raghavan, Lakshman, Rajesh, Amit, etc. For our convenience, we give such labels, and we mistake that convenience label to be a permanent entity. That is why we suffer. Okay, so because of not understanding that all of these relations are temporary, we suffer, and they give their own ideas as to how we can remove this suffering. I'm spending relatively less time in this section because I'm assuming that a lot of this has been covered by the previous speakers. The Jaina Darshana, they also try to answer the question of suffering. They also say, why is it that we suffer? And they give a very, very original answer. They say that we suffer because we mistake our partial view of truth to be the complete view of truth. So you can see in this picture over there in the slide, there are 6 blind people trying to understand what an elephant is by touching different parts of the elephant. The fellow who is touching the trunk says that reality is like a rope. The fellow who is touching the tusk says that no, reality is very smooth. The fellow who is touching the ears says that no, reality is like a pepper. Then another person says, who is touching the feet, says that no, reality is like a stump, like that he is saying. Are they false? No, they are not false. But are they true? No, they are not true. Each of them is true from a particular standpoint. Each of them is false from a particular standpoint. Our suffering lies in not knowing that our access is limited. We are all limited human beings. We can access only so much of reality. But we are under the ignorance that our access to reality is the access to reality. जो हमको पता है वही सब कुछ है. That's all we think, right? हमारे को छोड़ के कुछ है ही नहीं, like that we think. So when we realize that our truths are only partial, on that day we will be liberated. You can see in the same picture there are two people sitting on the top corner, left hand side corner and the right hand side corner. There are two people who are able to see the reality in its entirety. They are called the Tirthankara. They are the Siddha Purushas. They are the ones who have attained liberation. So only they can perceive reality in its entirety. But the rest of us can perceive only the limited view. So for example, when you are looking at me, sorry, my video is switched up. Maybe I will just. So see, you are now looking at me. You are able to see only my neck. You don't know what I am wearing downstairs, isn't it? That's a silly joke, but yeah, I am wearing trousers. But yeah, so you are not able to. You are only having limited access to reality. But we all think that this only is reality. That's all. There's nothing more to it. And this is the cause for our suffering. So they tell their ways how to remove the suffering, etc. They have their own theory as to how that is the case. Right? So that is the Jaina theory. And then the Nyaya Vaisheshika, the Nyaya has made very, very important contributions to our epistemology. They have given the methods of investigation to everyone. And the Vaisheshika has managed to categorize the world into many categories. So in the screen, you will be able to see the periodic table. Why I have put the periodic table? If you take the snapshot of the world, the elements, like somebody said there, you will get, no matter what picture you take, you will get these elements. In the same way, no matter what you capture, what episode of life you capture, you will be able to find some 7 substances or 7 categories in the world. What are those 7 categories? You will either have substances, or you will have attributes, or you will have actions, or you will have universals, or you will have particularity, or you will have inherence, or you will have an absence. So those of you who are seeing this on mobile or on laptop, something like that, you please take a screenshot or something like that. I will ask you a question in the next slide. Okay. So whenever you see reality, you will be able to see either a substance, or you will be able to see some attribute, or you will be able to see some action, or you will be able to see some universal, or some particular, or some inherence, or some actions. Okay. So I will give you an example of how this philosophical categorization works. You take a simple sentence like this. Okay. No brown cow walks here. Are you able to see any substance term over here? Any term that indicates a substance?
Cow.
Cow, yes, very good. Cow indicates a substance. Are you able to see any word that indicates an attribute or a quality?
Brown.
Brown.
Yes, very good.
Brown.
So instead of brown, if it was red, green, yellow, tall, fat, short, whatever it is, it will be under the category called guna or attribute. Are you able to see any action term over here?
Walk.
Correct. That is karma.
Walk.
Instead of walk, if it was running, sitting, jogging, whatever it will be coming under karma only. So what about that here? H-E-R-E, here. Where will you put it? What does here, there, what do these things indicate? They indicate space. Yeah, they indicate space. And according to the Vaisheshika, space is also a dravya. So that is why it is put under the dravya. And then you have the category called as a samanya, based upon which you are able to recognize a cow as a cow. You may not have seen that particular cow ever in your life, but you are able to recognize that it is a cow. Why? Because it has the universal called a gotva or the cowness. And because each cow is different from another cow, it also has some particularity in it. And all of these things are held together by some a relationship called Samavaya. If there is any question, I will. It's somewhat a technical concept. It is an unbreakable relationship between two entities that is called Samavaya. And lastly, you have just one more word, which is no. We will classify it under Abhava or absence. So you are able to see how we can take any episode of reality and classify it into these 7 categories. That may be a material entity, that may be a non-material entity, it does not matter to us. So this is the contribution of the Vaisheshika. They have given the most general categories into which a world can be divided in order to make sense of it. The next school that we will consider is the Sankhya and Yoga. So this is very popular. Yoga, you all know what is the contribution that it has made. Sankhya has provided the theory for it, and they have also tried to explain the world in some way, and they have given a diachronous classification of the world. How did the world evolve? And according to them, the world has evolved from 2 primordial sources, the Prakriti and the Purusha. These 2 entities got together, and as soon as these 2 entities got together, the first thing that was created was the Buddhi, or our intellect, and from this intellect arose our Ahankara, or the ego, and this ego itself manifested as the mind and the sense organs as well as the motor organs, and it also gave rise to the subtle organs, subtle elements. The subtle elements gave rise to the Panchamahabhuta, earth, water, fire and air, etc. So you will notice here that their Sankhya has made a model in which it is able to explain material entities as well as non-material entities. In the previous slide, you might have noticed that I have shown on the left-hand side, I have shown the Big Bang. The Big Bang is not able to explain how the consciousness has evolved. It is able to explain the material evolution. It is able to explain how matter has evolved, but it is not able to explain how consciousness has evolved. But the Sankhya model is able to explain both the evolution of material entities as well as non-material entities based upon this Prakriti and Purusha model. And this is a very important contribution that it has made. In Ayurveda, they take it as it is. This model of Sattva and Rajas, so Prakriti and Purusha, and Prakriti being constituted of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, etc. They take it entirely. So the Indian concept of the Sankhyas have been as it is taken in the Ayurveda and as well as in the Yoga. Then coming to the Mimamsa, they also play an important role in interpretation. So the Purva Mimamsa explains how the ritual part of the Veda works, and the Vedanta focuses on how the spiritual is to be understood. So this is a brief gist of the important doctrines of the different traditions. So now I will just spend a few more minutes trying to explain to you what are the important contributions that have been made in the methodological side. So I told you, right, that I've already given a hint as to how the Indian philosophical tradition has helped the sciences. So the Sankhya theory is as it is taken in Ayurveda. I will give you a few more examples as to how the methodology taken in the darshanas has been taken by the scientists. For this, I will take you to the pramana. So what are the various pramanas? Yeah, sir, could you please mute? It is some. Yeah, thank you. So these pramanas, for those of you who do not know, a pramana is a causal mechanism which takes you from cognition to knowledge. So all of us have cognitions, but not all cognitions we have are knowledge. So supposing I have the cognition that today is Tuesday, then this is not knowledge, right? So all cognitions which are true are called as knowledge. So the pramana is a causal mechanism by which you go from knowledge to so you go from cognition to knowledge. And in our Darshanic tradition, 3 pramanas have been identified. One is called Pratyaksha, which is sense perception. The other one is called Anumana, which is inference. The third one is called Shabda, which is testimony. The fourth one is Upamana, which is comparison. Fifth one is Arthapati, that is inference to best explanation. And the last one is Anupalabdhi, which is non-perception. And you will notice that I have bolded 3 of them, that is Pratyaksha, Anumana and Shabda, because you will notice them in different traditions. Even the scriptures accept. Yeah? Sorry?
हाँ बुराटकर सर आपका स्पीकर ऑन है.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so what I was telling is that these three, Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Shabda, they are common to many sciences. I will give you evidence for that. So if you see the first quotation on the slide, there are threefold sources of knowledge about disease character, such as authority, perception, and inference. So this is taken from some work which has the abbreviation CS. Can you guess what is this work I have taken it from? It is talking about diseases. What could be this work?
Charak Samhita.
Yes, Charaka Samhita. So in Charaka Samhita, Charaka is telling that if you want to know about the disease, what has caused this disease, how can you know about it? By these three pramanas called as authority, perception, and inference. Authority means Shabda Pramana, perception is Pratyaksha Pramana, and inference is Anumana Pramana. Similarly, a second quotation you can see at the bottom of the slide. The works of a king may be visible, invisible, and inferential. This I have taken from a work named A. What could be this work? Can you guess? I have already mentioned this.
Arthashastra Kautilya.
Arthashastra of Kautilya. Correct. Very good. So Kautilya is telling that if you want to know what your neighbor king is doing, it can be in three ways. Either it is visible, or it is invisible, or it can be inferred. So that which is visible, you can directly see via Pratyaksha Pramana. That which is invisible, you can get to know from spice. And that which is inferential, you can do the inference. So for example, when China is laying a big road next to Doklam, immediately we get worried. Why? Because we infer that there could be a larger troop build-up over here. So you see, whether in political sciences or whether it is in the medical sciences, you are once again resorting to the same three pramanas. So the important point to take away over here is that there is no separate thing called scientific method in our tradition apart from these pramanas. And where have we got these pramanas from? We have got it from the darshanas, particularly from the Nyaya Darshana and the Bauddha Darshanas. So that is the important contribution that the Indian darshanas have given to the Indian sciences. If you ask too many questions about what is perception, what is inference, if you go and ask these kinds of questions to Charaka Samhita, to Charaka will say, you please go and read Nyaya and come back. That is what they will say. So there is no separate thing called scientific method or engineering method in our tradition. We use the same three pramanas everywhere. And among these three pramanas, the one pramana which we have little more weightage is Shabda Pramana. In our tradition, we always say that Arey, hamare Guruji ne bola hai. Like that, I'm sure you all know how much respect we give for our tradition. And for that also, we have evidence in the Charaka Samhita. You see the highlighted part. Out of these three sources of knowledge, first of all, knowledge is obtained from authority. Thereafter, the examination proceeds via inference and perception. Because if there is no authoritative material, what could one go and do the inference and perception on? So what Charaka is telling is that if you want to know something, first you find out what is the authoritative material in this. Then you go and do perception and inference. Are you able to relate it to some scientific method which we do even today? Some step in our scientific method? I repeat the question. Charaka is telling that if you want to find out about something, first you see what is the authoritative material that is available in this matter. Are you able to relate it to some step in the research methodology? Yes, literature review. Yes, we all do this, no? Literature survey or literature review, we all do this. So that is precisely what Charaka is telling, that you first do literature survey, then you can do your own experiments in this. So I will take one particular pramana in particular, which is Anumana, and show you how all the scientific methods that we are using today are in some way or the other embedded in these Anumana or the pramanas. So the definition of an Anumana or an inference. Oh, by the way, if there are any Telugu or Telugu speaking people, Anumana in Telugu means doubt. Anumanistunadu, like that. That is not the meaning here. Anumana means inference. Okay. So inference, you are inferring something. So for example, if you see that it's a working day and all the shops are closed, you will infer that there is a bandh, there is a strike, something like that. So this kind of thing is called Anumana. And in every Anumana, there will be four logical elements. First one is called Hetu, second one is called Sadhya, third one is called Vyapti, and the fourth one is Paksha. So the Hetu is what you already know. The Sadhya is that which you want to prove. जिसको हम सिद्ध करना चाहते हैं, जिसको हम साध्य करना चाहते हैं, that is called sadhya. The rule that is connecting the hetu and the sadhya, that is called as vyapti, and the place that you want to establish this is called the paksha. If I take an example, you will all be able to understand this. You see, I have put an inference over here. Force has been imparted to this ball because it is moving. So can you identify what is the hetu, what is the sadhya, what is the paksha, etc.? What do you already know about the ball? No, you don't know.
Moving is the hetu.
Yeah,
It's
moving. You are already able to perceive that it is moving. Ball is moving. So that is the hetu. Based upon the motion, what do you want to prove?
force has been imparted to this.
Force has been imparted. Force has been imparted. That is what
Force
you
is
want.
the shadha.
Yeah.
Ball
Force
is the paksha.
sadhya. Correct.
And
ball
the
is
invariable relation
because
is between moving and the
force
force.
imparted. Yeah. So for those of us who know the physics, it is the first law of motion. Without motion, without force, there cannot be a motion. This is the first law of inertia, which is a body will remain at rest unless an external force acts upon it. So this is the vyapti that is connecting between the two. So once you have the hetu, paksha, sadhya, and vyapti, you will arrange it in a systematic order, which we call the panchavayava, etc. That is not important for us. What is important for us is the comparison with the scientific method. So when you arrange it in a systematic way, first you will present your hypothesis. What is the hypothesis? That the ball has been subjected to some force. And to substantiate that hypothesis, you will give some evidence. What is the evidence? Because it is having motion. Then you will give the general rule, which establishes the connection between the evidence and the hypothesis. What is, in this case, it is the first law of motion. And herein lies the trick, that apart from giving the general rule, you should also give an example of where you have seen this general rule applying before. This is what we do in our research methodology also, that whenever we do some research, we give prior studies. Research never happens in a vacuum. It always happens in some context. So if you are doing something in your literature survey, you will tell what are the prior studies that have already happened here. So in the same way, in the Anumana model also, you should tell where you have seen this general rule being applied in the previous case. And then in the fourth step, you have to establish that the current case is very much like the previous case. Therefore, we are using the general rule over here. In some cases, what happens is that the general rule is not applicable. Even then we rule. That is called the fallacy of accident. So that we are not committing. And then finally, your hypothesis becomes the conclusion. So you may notice that the first statement and the fifth statement, only one word is different. That is hence. That's all. But there is a big difference. There is a big epistemic difference between the first statement and the last statement. In the first statement, it is only a hypothesis. But by the time you have given the evidence, by the time you have stated the general rule, etc., the hypothesis has become a conclusion. So you are able to see how many elements of what we today call research methodology are embedded into the pramana apparatus itself. So the idea that you are supposed to do literature survey, you saw from Charaka. The idea that some hypothesis should be substantiated by evidence, and the evidence should be connected to the hypothesis by some general rule, and the general rule should be further substantiated by prior studies. All of this is embedded within the pramana apparatus called the Anumana Pramana. So you can see that further substantiation for the previous claim that I have made, that in India we don't have a separate method called scientific method. The pramanas themselves form the scientific method. And where do you get the pramanas from? From the darshanas. Right? So to come to a summary of what I presented in the last 1.5 hours or so, to understand the Indian philosophical traditions, you should understand a little bit of the philosophical assumptions that we have made. And in India, these philosophical assumptions have been built over a very long tradition, starting all the way from the Veda, even continuing into the present day. All the traditions may not be alive. For example, Vaisheshika is no longer alive. Sankhya is maybe no longer alive. Mimamsa survives only very little bit. But it can, if we are interested, we can always bring it back, no problem. And there's a lot of variety in these darshanas. Each of them has a different starting point. Some people focus on the pramata, some people focus on the prameya, some people focus on the pramana, the subject, object, and the access. But there is some commonality between all of them, and the most important commonality is that they all search for this thing called as moksha. What is this moksha? It is a place where there is no suffering at all. There is only happiness, there is no suffering. But just because I'm saying that it is a quest for moksha, it does not mean that it does not have day-to-day advantages. Doing darshana has day-to-day advantages also. I gave you the quotation from Kautilya, who told that doing darshana will make you skillful in your thoughts, action, and your words, and it will also keep you equanimous in trouble as well as in pleasure. And the most important contribution that the darshanas have given is that they have given several metaphysical as well as epistemological tools for the Indian sciences. So, like the Sankhya model of Prakriti Purusha is as it is accepted by Ayurveda. The Nyaya models of Pramana are as it is accepted by the other Shastras. So, they have given a lot of tools as well as concepts for the Indian sciences to work on. So with this, I end what I wanted to say. If you want me to repeat something or something is unclear, you can ask me. I will tell. I will risk opening my video. I hope it doesn't hang. Yeah, you can say any questions. I hope it was not too much of a repetition from the morning session.
No, sir, there are many points which we have heard for the first time. So it is not that much repetition.
Yeah.
So any question, friends?
Oh, that is good to know.
Okay, if there are no questions, we'll wind up our session here. So I extend my thanks to respected Venkata Raghavan sir for engaging an informative session for all the participants and for accepting our invitation for the session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, friends. हम यहाँ पे आज
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raman.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much, sir.
sir.
Once again from all of us. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, madam. Bye.
Yeah. Have a nice day, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
So friends, हम यहाँ पे
Thank you, sir.
आज कल आप लोगों को छुट्टी है, कल सैटरडे है, ठीक है? तो आज का जो रिपोर्ट सबमिशन आपको करना है वो आप कल तक भी सबमिट कर सकते हैं. आज रात को नहीं किया तो भी चलेगा. कल आप लोगों को छुट्टी है तो आप कल तक भी आज का रिपोर्ट सबमिट कर सकते हैं और हम मिलेंगे संडे को. संडे विल बी योर वर्किंग डे. संडे वी विल मीट एट 10:30 आवर रेगुलर टाइमिंग और 2 ही सेशंस रहेंगे. यू विल बी फ्री बाय 1:30. आप लोग 1:30 बजे फ्री हो जाएंगे. तो कल के दिन छुट्टी है, कल कोई भी सेशन नहीं रहेगा. कल का सैटरडे है और परसों हम लोग मिलेंगे अपने रेग्युलर टाइम पे. पवन यवतकर सर काही विचारायचे तुम्ही हँड रेस केलंय?
हो मॅडम. जे आपल्याला पीपीटी अपलोड करायची आहे ती उद्यापर्यंत जर करायची आहे त्याची लिंक वगैरे
त्याची लिंक पाठवायची मी सर अजून आज संध्याकाळपर्यंत पाठवते. ठीक आहे.
ओके चालेल.
म्हणजे बनवायला सुरुवात करून द्या. 1-2 दिवसात पाठवलं तरी चालेल.
ओके थँक्यू मॅडम.
ओके सर.
Thank you, madam.
थँक्यू. प्रशांत
Thank you,
सर
madam.
काही
Thank you.
विचारायचंय?
हा मॅम, ह्या सेशनचा आपल्याला व्हिडिओ मिळेल का अपलोड?
आता जे सेशन झालं ना,
हा हा
हो त्याचं रेकॉर्डिंग मी आता पाठवते. पहिल्या 2 सेशनचं रेकॉर्डिंग पाठवलं आहे.
ओके हे पाठवून द्या.
ठीक है. चलिए फ्रेंड्स, मिलते हैं संडे को सुबह.
धार्मिक मॅडम,
हाँ
धार्मिक मॅडम,
बोला.
सॉरी ते काय झालं सुरुवातीला जे अटेंडन्स टाकलं होतं ना 3 तारखेला